The Nobel Prize in Economics was recently awarded to Harvard professor Claudia Golden. The Nobel Committee chose her for the honor and saying, quote, having advanced our understanding of women's labor market outcomes. And Junwei Sum tells us more about what that means.
It was a first for women in two ways. Harvard economist Claudia Golden was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize for Economics on her own and not as part of a team. And her research on women in the labor market is the first time women have been at the center of winning work.
As women have increased their role in the labor force, it's become more apparent that there are these huge residual differences. And we stand back from them and we ask, why are there these differences? Women are now more educated than men. They graduate from college at much higher rates than men. They do better in high school than men do. So why are there these differences? And we realize that these differences, although some are found within the labor market, are really reflections of what happens within individuals' homes.
Golden is talking about women, for example, having to do more unpaid household chores or fulfilling a societal expectation to step back from their careers if they become mothers. The United Nations reports that around the world, women still spend nearly 3 hours more per day than men on unpaid care and domestic work. That's just one of the many ways that progress in closing the gender gap at work and at home is still lagging.
The world is falling short of achieving gender equality, and this becomes an ever increasingly distant goal. With only 7 years remaining, we must make every moment count.
Golden has spent decades running experiments and passing through data to explain why women's experience in the labor force is different than men's. In one famous study, she and fellow economist Cecilia Rouse studied auditions for a symphony orchestra. They found that when a musician's identity was concealed behind a screen when they played, women were more likely to be hired. More recently, Golden's research revealed that women during the pandemic, at least highly educated women in the United States, did not leave their jobs as much as people thought they might.
That means, though, that they had greater stressors, and the impact of these greater stressors might be felt later on in terms of their promotions, for example. Now, work from home for many women became work from hell, and we know that. And so it raised in our consciousness the notion that care should come to the top in terms of public policy.
That's access to affordable, quality childcare. Just one of the many actions needed to get women not only into the labor market, but into roles where they can make decisions and change the working landscape. Junwei Sum, CGTN.
A bit more about this. Lack of affordable childcare is a huge issue in the United States, stopping many people from going to work and adding to the labor shortage. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce reports that 1.4 million fewer Americans are working today compared to February of 2020. 20% of a survey said they could not go back to work after the pandemic because they have to care for children or other family members. Now, many child care providers were forced to close during the pandemic for obvious reasons. Advocacy group Childcare Aware says child care centers in the United States have rebounded, but the number of licensed family child care homes was down 11% last year from the year 2019, and the cost is high, nearly $11,000 a year on the average. Wow. Okay, so let's talk more about this. And to find out more about the gender pay gap, we're joined by Yan Liang. She is a professor of economics at Willamette University. Yan Liang, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming in and chatting to us about this. Appreciate it.
Good to talk to you, Sean.
But let's kind of get to the point. How much does the access to childcare affect the economic growth? The one thing, $11,000 a year, I've heard many families say that the spouse is going back to work just to pay for childcare.
Absolutely. I think it affects the U.S. economy to a great deal. I think from the demand side, when a family has to shell out $11,000, which is, 15% on average of their household disposable income, that means they have less money to buy food, buy house, to buy any other, discretionary items. So that could drag down on the demand. And then from the supply side, I think if you have access to affordable and high quality childcare, this means parents can advance their careers, they can, advance their education, they can improve their productivity. And also, let's not forget, these little children, they are the workforce in the future.
Yeah.
So if we could provide good early education, this is going to generate somewhere between $4 to $6 return for every $1 that you put down for early education.
Wow.
So it's a huge impact. And the lack of the affordable, childcare has cost the U.S. economy $122 billion in 2021, according to the Bipartisan Council for Working Americans. So this is a great deal of loss.
Sure.
That includes, foregone incomes because people can't go to work, as you just mentioned, the reporter mentioned, and also reduced, economic productivities, and also the loss in tax revenues because the less earning and less productivity.
Okay, $122 billion. Let's take it from there, and you can say that the U.S. needs to do a better job investing in child care infrastructure in the U.S. What can be done?
Well, there's a lot that can be done. And I think, as the Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders said, the U.S.'s childcare, it's an international embarrassment. So I definitely think we need to double down on the investments, both at the state level, but more importantly at the federal level, to really subsidize, childcare, to make it more affordable, to provide incentives, tax breaks, or subsidies for private sector to run more high quality childcare. But again, I think at the federal level, a lot of states have some sort of free preschool care, but I think we can do a lot more, expand the eligibility, improve the number of these kinds of facilities. Right now, about I think there are 1 in every 5 American residents live in the so-called child care deserts, which is defined in an area where over 3 under year 5 children with only 1 licensed childcare spot. So, we're very much lacking in that very basic infrastructure that would help the economy. And so the government really needs to do more.
And I've heard horror stories when you talk about these areas that just simply aren't serviced for childcare, about parents who sleep out on the street overnight to sign up and get into these quality yet affordable places that do provide childcare. So who should be paying for these investments? The government, employers, workers? How do you break this up?
Right, I think that's a great question. I think in the first place, the families are already paying a lot. Like we just mentioned, it's easily, the child care cost is easily, 15% on average. But for, divorced parent or people of color, it's easily, a quarter of their household disposable income that goes into child care. So I think families are already overburdened. Now, employers, I think I have reservations. I think on the one hand, it is good for employers to provide some of this care, but at the same time, it's going to be disadvantage for some small and medium-sized enterprises. This could also undermine their competitiveness. And also, I think it would create an overdependence of workers on their employers to provide, all these essential needs, and that would disempower workers. And last but not least, I also think that, a lot of people who are outside the workforce who also need this essential care. So at the end of the day, I think really the government needs to do more, especially at the federal level, because, they do have a much higher financing capacity to be able to provide these services. And again, this is really essential services, and also can consider that's really an investment into the economic future. So I definitely think the government has both the ability, but also have the needs, the responsibilities to invest in the U.S.'s child care facilities and infrastructure.
Yan Liang, I got a chuckle out of that one soundbite in that story where the one woman said, "Work from home has become work from hell." But it's really not funny, because it really does point out just how difficult this is. When the pandemic started, a lot of people thought, oh, it's a chance for mothers to spend a little more time at home with the little ones. But watching a child is a full-time job. You can't expect to do your job and then watch a child as well.
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, this could be the downsides of, this kinds of flexible work arrangements. It is true, by working from home, this could reduce commute time by about 72 minutes a day on average, according to some survey. And so that's the precious time that you could spend with family and your children. But at the same time, it is true, I think, with the gender norm, with the social norm, women are, expected to take on more childcare burden or responsibility, especially when they have this kinds of flexible work schedule, work from home. They intentionally or unintentionally take on a lot more, childcare responsibilities. And then at the same time, I think, once they made the choice of staying home, they somehow also get some kinds of disadvantages from the workplace, because they expect, when you work from home, you're working less, you're less efficient.
Sure.
So I think that's a double whammy, and it heightened, the so-called double shifts on women.
Wow. Well, we could talk about this quite some time, but that's all the time we have at this moment. Yan Liang, as always, a pleasure. Thanks very much for your insight.
Thank you so much, John.